This is Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash, a podcast about everything that happens after Git push. Ship It is brought to you by Fly.io, the home of changelog.com. Launch your apps close to your users all around the world. Learn how at Fly.io.
What's up, friends? I'm here with a good friend of mine, Adam Jacob, co-founder and CEO of System Initiative. And I'm pretty excited to have him here because that means System Initiative is out there. It's GA. Adam, I heard that you launched something.
Yeah. Oh, I'm stoked. We did. Yeah. We launched something on the 25th of September. And yeah, you can use System Initiative now by going to a website and signing up, and 3 clicks and you're in. And then you can automate infrastructure. It's sick. It's the coolest thing in the universe. I'm so proud of it.
Well, let's level some folks up. Let's level up the Terraform folks, the Pulumi folks, the AWS CDK folks. As of System Initiative being GA, these folks are kind of doing things the old way, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I hope is true.
Okay.
I think,
Yeah.
Look, here's what it is. Basically, we figured out that part of the reason that it's so hard for us to achieve the outcomes we're looking to achieve with the kind of DevOps and operational work that we do is because the tools we're using sort of help bring about those tough outcomes. It's a lot harder to write static code, have your friends review it. In System Initiative, what you do is you use this living architecture diagram to put together all the different relationships between the things that you use. And then you can program that architecture diagram to do all the stuff you need it to do. So it automatically understands how to do things like, create resources and delete them or update their tags or do those things. But then you can also extend it with your own custom policy. And the whole thing happens in real time in multiplayer. Let's say you're going to build some infrastructure. You got to go, use an AWS account. You're going to launch a new service. So you got to go set up all the different pieces, the VPCs and the EKS clusters and, ECS and database services. And you got to set up IAM rules. There's all this stuff you got to do. With System Initiative, what'll happen is you'll sign up, you'll get this workspace, and then you'll have this list of all the different architecture assets that AWS provides. And what you'll do is throw those things into this big diagram in the center of the screen, which is basically this living architecture diagram. And then you'll connect them together just like you would if you were drawing an architecture. And what it's doing when you do that is actually writing the code to describe how these things work. And it's running it as a simulation. So it's telling you in real time, this would work or this wouldn't. So you don't have to wait. There's no long feedback loops. We can actually vet all of that infrastructure and all that architecture in advance. Then you can say, hey, this looks good. It's what I want to see in the real world. And you can apply that change set. And it's keeping track of all the different things you have to do to actually go make that infrastructure real. And then it goes and does it. And then after it does, it keeps track of those things too. So you can see both sides. You can see the real thing in the world that is what you created, and it's attached to the model of what you thought you wanted. And then you can use that to manage it over time. And then when you have customizations or tweaks or things you need to build for yourself, you can go write that directly into the system in real time in these same kind of change sets that you use to do the infrastructure. And so that's what it's like to use System Initiative. It's the most powerful, intuitive, collaborative way to do this work that's ever existed.
Okay, System Initiative is out there. It is GA, and it's the future. Go to systeminit.com. Get started in 3 clicks. They do have a free tier that means free. No credit card required that you can play with. Again, systeminit.com. That's systeminit.com.
Hello and welcome to Ship It, the podcast all about what happens after you Git push. I'm your host, Justin Garrison, and with me, as always, is Autumn Nash. How's it going, Autumn?
I'm so tired.
But it's almost fall, and so fall is good for being tired, right?
It's spooky season. I can't wait to bust out all the sweaters and yummy baked goods and blankets and just I'm so excited.
you're doing that and I'm buying projects. I bought some LEDs to make some spooky decorations that I can make motion sensors and individually address them.
This is why you need to just live next door so I can hang out with Beth and so you can decorate my house. Like,
okay. Well, it's a project I started last year and I bought a bunch of stuff for and I didn't finish. And so I went a different route this year and I'm going to try to finish it before decorations are due.
I love your neurospicy ADHD. Like
all the specialties.
Oh my God. Okay. I've had a skeleton in my front yard since July. Like it's a gigantic
It's the giant Costco ones, right? Like
it makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's the one that's coming out of the ground. I want a 15-footer. I'm like stalking those Facebook groups and like, can a girl just get a 12-foot like skeleton? Like, is it that hard? There was a meme the other day and it was like waiting for a husband and wife to get divorced so a husband will be mad at his wife and sell her 12-foot skeleton. And I was like,
find him cheap secondhand.
Yeah, I was like, that's so horrible. Also, I'd still buy it, but like that's so not nice, people. But I would buy it though.
Surprisingly, this isn't what we're here for today. we have Dave Eddy as a guest here. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
So we were talking a little bit in the pre-show about just how this started, and I found you on TikTok, good old For You page, somehow knew that I love Bash, and your video showed up, and you say, "Hi, I'm Dave, and you suck at programming." And I'm just gonna be honest, like that immediately like stabbed me in the chest because I know I suck at programming.
You just out here hurting people's feelings, just like
it was just a harsh start, and I'm like, I don't want to watch this because it's gonna be something that I do suck at, and I know I suck at. Like at first I was like, this is gonna be a JavaScript talk because I'm terrible at JavaScript. But then I saw your face. I'm like, you don't look like a JavaScript developer. Just you got the beard, you got the long hair. Like this didn't look like the route I was going. So I'm like, I'm gonna hear you out for another second, and then once you dove into like this is Bash, I don't remember what it was. I forget what the first video I saw was, but it was something like exit codes, or it wasn't traps, but something along those lines. Like, this is a Bash script. This is how we do like star globbing or something like that. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is real programming. This is what I'm here for.
Oh man, that's fantastic. That's like the best thing I've ever heard. Yeah.
Wait, can we unpack the sentence you said there? First of all, every JavaScript and like developer ever is so offended right now. He said real programming, y'all. He just the gloves are off. We are 2 minutes into this podcast. He's offending half the nation. Like, also,
it's so funny because none of that registered to me. I was like, yeah, this all sounds fine. I'm following. Yep, keep going.
Story checks out.
Also, I love that Justin was like, he's got a beard and long hair. They can't be a JavaScript. What a JavaScript developer look like.
Well, listen, at my last job, I did a lot of JavaScript and my hair was very short. So there is some truth to that.
He's like, there's a correlation, y'all. There's a correlation. Like,
absolutely.
We've had Paul on the show. He was JavaScript and you look, I don't want to say you look nicer. It's just you look like your life hasn't fallen apart yet.
Shade. Are you saying this is what Bash does to you? Because I kind of want to co-sign that. I don't know. Like, I don't have a beard, like, but I do have long. I don't know. I don't know.
No, this is real though. I get comments all the time where people are like, no offense, but you look like you would know Bash. And I was like, why'd you have to say no offense? Like that would have been a fine sentence without saying no offense. Why'd you have to add that?
Why do people say no offense like that's going to make it better, whatever they're going to say?
No offense, this is rough.
It makes it so much worse. Like you're just like, but why?
Yeah. I wouldn't have taken offense, but now that you said it.
I question, like...
I mean, and this, like, everything about you suck at programming, the thing you've been doing, immediately like transferred to me when I think it was like 3 or 6 months later when you started talking about Rust. And I'm like, oh wow, now this story really checks out. Like this is completely valid. But tell us, like, why did you start You Suck at Programming? Why is that like the bit you started with, and what made you want to do this?
Sure. Yeah, I can jump into it. I started around 2 years ago, actually. At this time, it was 2022 when I uploaded my first programming video. Before that, I was making music. I do like piano music, guitar, stuff like that. And I had a TikTok, but it was just for fun. I was just uploading some music stuff, browsing memes with friends. It was never anything serious. I wasn't doing any sort of content creation really. But then it was 2 years ago. I did a presentation at my job where I went over some cool little Bash features, and everyone was like, Dave, that was awesome. Like, you should do this. You should like upload this to YouTube or something. Like, not this one because like the company owns it or whatever, but like, make your own and upload them to YouTube. I was like, you know what? I should try doing that. That'd be kind of fun. So it was 2022. I uploaded my first one and I was like, how could I make this funny? Like what could I do? And I was like, well, I got to come out of the gate swinging. I got to come out. I don't even know why I came up with it, but I looked at the camera and I was like, yo, what's up, everyone? My name's Dave and you suck at programming. All right, today we're going to jump in with Bash. And once I had that, I was like, this is it. Like that is what all my content's going to be going forward. And I wanted to get under people's skin just a little bit where I was like, let's talk about programming and then open up right away with Bash scripting. So already I'm getting comments like, this isn't programming. And I'm like, let's go. Keep commenting, guys. This video has almost got 100 or like 1 million views on TikTok. So like, let's go. Keep commenting. That's how it started. It got really good reactions from people. And then I was like, you know what? I like talking about programming. I know this stuff. I might as well just like share it and make this content. It's fun. So yeah, that's the story. That's the road.
I loved that you used the Elon sauce and was like, I'm going to offend you.
It's just engagement hacking, any social media, especially for you page, AI driven sort of automated stuff. Like if it's not a thumbnail, you have to get them another way. And an offense is a great way to get a hook, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I just think that it's funny that we know that now and we've accepted it.
Oh yeah.
But I actually just really appreciate the double hook there of like, you suck at programming, but also let's dive into Bash. Yep. And like that again, to me was just like, I'm here. Hold on a second. I want more of this. And your path really reminded me, like I did an internal ZSH program or ZSH shell workshop at my old job. And I ended up going to a conference and giving that workshop. And I have a Git repo called Mastering ZSH that's been around for a long time, which was like, I tried to call out all the things that were different, right? Like here's Bash. Everyone knows Bash. And it was right around the time Mac OS switched to ZSH. I did it just before that. And I was just like, oh, I've been using ZSH for years. And here's the unique things about it. Here's what might trip you up if you're coming from Bash. And here's some cool things that you can't do in Bash that might make it worth switching if you want to. And that for me, like just led into like more and more people like, oh, this ZSH thing's great. Like, how do you do that? Like, I don't know. I still write all my scripts in Bash though. I'm like, this is not like interactive shell is different than the thing that I want to run and automate over time.
That's so true. And like, I kind of want to point people to that because I get questions all the time. How does this differ from ZSH? Why didn't you choose ZSH? And it's like, because I was using Bash before ZSH was like everywhere. Like, I just don't know it. And then of course the comments are like, so why do you hate ZSH? I was like, I never said I hated it. Like that's a crazy thing to deduce.
Yeah. You know what? I love waffles. Why do you hate pancakes? It's not how this works. It's okay.
I love that. It's so perfect.
I think people really think that those are like the only options. And I'm like, it's really not that serious, guys. It's just like you've been doing one longer. That's it.
100%. I get this with text editors. People ask me what I use. I'm like, oh yeah, I code in Vim. And they're like, oh, so you hate Emacs? Like, didn't you mention you hate Emacs? I was like, I've never said that. I don't hate any editor. They're just tools. Like, you know, I use Makita instead of Milwaukee when it comes to my drills. I don't care. It's a drill. Like, that's a text editor. My identity is not roped into it. I don't care.
Some people's identities really are roped into it, though.
100%. Yep.
It's wild.
It's okay to not have your identity be tied to a tool or a job or something. Like you can just have a different identity outside of that.
Yep. And you can spot it so easily when someone gets defensive when someone uses something that they don't use. And it's like, who cares? I can't imagine caring about this. It's crazy to me. It's a text editor. It's a scripting language. Like use whatever one you're comfortable with.
Speaking of identity, you said you started with music, and I only recently started listening to your music. Great piano music, just kind of background.
Well, thank you.
But also you do a bunch of woodworking too, right? Like you're usually in your garage and you're like a bunch of wood everywhere. Like what other hobbies do you have?
It's so funny you would say that. My first live stream I did on Instagram like a month ago now. I was just in my garage in front of the woodworking and people kept asking me questions like, you guys really want to know about this? That's crazy. I thought you guys were only here for the programming. And everyone was like, this guy's in a tank top, drinking a beer, talking about like programming. Like, of course we're interested. I was like, all right. Yeah. I mean, you know, now I look back, I'm like, yeah, that is pretty cool. Like that live stream goes pretty hard. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, no, the woodworking is a big thing. Even now we're in the living room of my house. That ceiling, this beam up there, I faced that all in pine. I put that ceiling up. The table that I'm sitting at right now, I built this desk. I like to build things. Trying to think of other fun hobbies. Usually it's just piano, woodworking, programming. Those are kind of like the big three. I'm sure there's more I'm forgetting. Actually, I don't know what day this podcast will come out, but I can tell you right now when we're done, I'm about to head to Best Buy so I can pick up the new Zelda game. So I'm going to be playing that for a while. So that's definitely something I'm interested in.
Nice. So you have this "you suck at programming" kind of like almost like a meme now. It's in some cases like it's like that's the brand that you're kind of doing all of this under. You've been doing it on multiple social media accounts, but also like your website. Like when I don't remember when I saw it, but you said like you can just curl the website. I'm like, no, you can't. Like you did not. and you can curl ysap.com. Is it
SH?
Of course it's SH. Oh my god, of course.
.sh. Of course.
But you can curl it and you get the plain text with the link, everything else. And like I did that once, like I had Nginx config where I want people to curl this, and you can just find the agent and then send them the text file instead of the HTML. And it's a fantastic little Easter egg. And when I did it, I'm like, oh, now I'm stuck. Like I have to watch more of your videos. I have to do more. So why are you going the extra mile for those types of things when this is kind of a meme and it's for fun?
Oh man, I will go the extra 10 miles if it means committing to the bit. I am absolutely here to just go in hard. Like if you were to ask me like, Dave, is Bash the best programming language? I'd be like, well, there's all sorts of languages. They're all good for different use cases, and it depends on what you're trying to doing. But if you really ask me like, Dave, is Bash the best programming language? I'd be like, absolutely it is. Nothing even comes close. So of course I'm gonna when I get to make my use like a programming content, I get to turn my personality up to 11, and that's kind of the reason I do it. Where it's like, why am I able to curl your website and get this data in like plain text? It's like, why wouldn't you be able to do that?
Yeah,
of course you're able to do that.
Yeah.
It's my content. Of course you could do that. So I like that. Bragging rights.
And to the point earlier about like JavaScript, I'm pretty sure there's more Bash written than JavaScripts in the world of just like people at terminals and history files and all. Like that's like you're writing code, and I always feel this like knee jerk, like, oh, people say it's like not a programming language. Like actually, like I've written a lot of bad things in Bash, and I still to this day I'm like, if I'm prototyping something, I'm going to write it in Bash the first time, just because it's going to be the fastest way for me to do it. What's something you regret writing in Bash?
Oh man, regret. It's so funny. I don't actually regret writing anything in Bash because, like you mentioned, I kind of reach for it first. And then if something evolves beyond Bash or needs something that Bash doesn't have, so this would be like very strict data types or being able to parse structured data like JSON or something where I don't want to rely on an external tool like JQ, that's when it grows up and it gets to go to a different language. So an example of this would be on Void Linux, which is the distribution of Linux I really like. I wrote a piece of software called VSV, and it shows you all of your services, and if they're running, you can restart them. It's kind of like a nice wrapper. If you're on like Ubuntu, think of like systemctl, but like a nice version of that. And a nicer version. I'm not saying it's not nice. I don't like systemctl, but I'm not throwing that in right now. But no, so I wrote that, and it was originally in Bash, and then I needed something faster. I just needed it to execute in parallel. I needed to make it work on a Raspberry Pi and have it go quickly. So that's when I switched it over and wrote it in Rust. So that's kind of, I don't regret writing it in Bash. It's just Bash is a good starting point. So that's kind of how I view it.
I've had 3 rules for myself ever since I wrote too many wrappers in Bash. That my rules for when a script grows up or moves to a general purpose language is either it grows more than 100 lines. I don't include comments because comments are usually half of the script anyway, but more than 100 lines, more than 2 arguments, or anytime I have to mess with an array.
Okay. Yep.
Once I'm in a Bash array, I'm like, I've made a mistake and I just want raw. I want the actual data, and I want to be able to process this better than trying to use an associative array in Bash. And so those have been my 3 rules for a long time that I'm like, I'm going to stop writing Bash now, and I'm going to move over to usually Python or Go. But I'm curious to know why or when you started going into Rust.
Oh, it's so funny you would say that. Before I get into the Rust thing, just jumping off what you said right there, you reminded me of a question that someone asked me. Basically, how do I know when it's time to leave Bash? And I told them, I was like, I just sort of have a line in the sand. Like once I get too complex, I switch over. And I was like, but reading your comment, it sounds like my line in the sand is just a little bit further than yours is. And I don't mean that in a judging way. I just mean like I'm comfortable with mangling arrays in Bash, but I know when I need nested data structures or arrays of arrays, I'm like, I can't do this. Like you actually can't, Bash can't nest arrays. So that's just a good example of something you're just not able to do. But then when it came down to Rust, I can tell you a quick little story. 2020, end of 2020, I quit my job and went unemployed. By choice. I was burnt out. I'd been working for like 10 years at that point, and I just wanted some time off. I had some money saved up. End of 2020, people weren't doing much anyway, so I was just kind of hanging out at home. So I took a little bit of a staycation for about a year and a half and focused on music and kind of just put programming aside. Like I was like, I'm just burnt out. Can't even think about it. And I had this moment where I I actually wondered, I was like, am I washed up? Like, I'm seeing all these job things. If I want to get back into the market, they're talking about Rust, and Rust is the new language. And I tried to learn it at one point, and it's hard. It's very complicated. It makes no sense to me. The syntax is difficult. The borrow checker hates me. I can't get anything to compile. I'm reading these things. It's like, oh, don't worry. You just have a lifetime over here and a reference over. I'm like, I'm lost. I don't know what this is like. I know how to malloc and I know how to use JavaScript. Like I'm out of my element here. But then I just sort of made it a challenge. I know it sounds weird. I got the Rust book and I just sat down and I was like, no, I'm a smart guy. I can learn this. So it was like 2021 when I really went heads down and do it and then started writing software in it just to like get better at it. And then I think about like, I don't know, 6 months after that, I was like, you know, not only did I learn this, I like this. This is like my new favorite language. Like I really, really like Rust. So I became one of those Rust bros that they talk about now. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And then when there were, you know, jobs opening up, when they wanted people who knew Rust, they were okay if you only knew a little bit of Rust. And I actually knew more than most jobs even needed. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is great.
Is there a reason why you pick Rust besides the fact that you learned it over Python? Because usually when I feel like something's too complex for Bash, I go to Python because it's like kind of to me, it's like my go-to other scripting language. Why is it just because you were like already learning Rust, or like do you like it better than Python for other reasons? Or
a couple answers to that actually. I learned Python like 10 years ago, but I only know it decently well. I'm not super great at Python. But for me, I sort of view Python and Rust differently. Like Python's for scripting and Rust is my compiled language. So I can get closer with like lower level system stuff. I can pull in like the Nix crate and just deal with like Unix directly. Whereas Python, you can do that a little bit, but it's more abstracted. Python's way better suited for scripting. Like if someone told me a script needs to be a script and it's outgrowing Bash, I think Python makes perfect sense. Even like JavaScript, if you wanted to run it with like Node.js or whatever any of the newer ones are that people really like, where you can have JavaScript on the server, I think that stuff's really cool. But just for me personally, if I wasn't going to do it in Bash, I might reach for C first. So Rust kind of replaced C for me in a lot of places. So that's a more logical thing. If Rust was going to replace Python, I think you would need more of a reason. Like I think performance would probably have to be the biggest reason why you'd want that. Or if you're dealing with like low level things, you want memory safety, certain things like that.
For me, moving off of Bash is usually a question of I need someone else to also run this, which is why I like once I have an array or I have more than 2 args, I'm like, someone else is going to mess this up because they don't have the same assumptions that I have going into it. And once I have to give someone else software, I want it to be compatible everywhere. And that's where Bash is fantastic because it is pretty much everywhere, or a compiled language because I'm like, I don't want them to deal with Python environments or env, they're like anything. If they're like, I need to modify this, I'm like, no, I'm giving you a compiled binary. You can run it. If you want to do something else with it, go over here, do this, like actually modify it. For Rust, I absolutely love the ecosystem, like crates and cargo is so fantastic. The compiler is wonderful, but I had the exact opposite kind of reaction to reading the Rust book right around the same time. I think it was during COVID. I was like, I'm going to read the Rust book because I wanted to learn a new language. And I finished reading it. I'm like, I don't want this. Like, this is something like I feel, it actually made me feel at the end, I was like, I don't feel like a good programmer because there was so much stuff that I didn't understand. And I know I learned better by actually doing it. And I should have had projects to like actually implement it and try some of the things and fail at it in, you know, not just reading it on a page. But that was definitely something that to me, like after reading the book, I'm like, I really like things about all the things I hate about Go, I like about Rust. Mm-hmm. But I'm more familiar with Go to be able to write the software that I'm like, oh, I just kind of deal with all the things I kind of hate in the ecosystem. Like I don't like Go mod. I just don't. Like
right. Yeah.
Cargo and crates is way better than that. I don't really like the compiler. All those things. I'm like, I want to like Rust in so many ways. And I haven't done enough with it.
Yeah, I definitely think that's interesting. I get a lot of comments like, why would you do this instead of Go? And the answer is I just never dealt with Go. Like, it's as simple as that. I didn't avoid it. It just never came up organically. So I just jumped straight into Rust. I might have different views if I had started with something like Go, because I know Go gives you like that almost like scripting language like environment, but then it gives you the speed of like a compiled binary. And it has a lot of nice stuff built into it. I think like with Rust, I'd have to pull in like Tokyo if I wanted some sort of task managing thing that could manage like threads and tasks that are, you know, abstractions on top of threads. I think Go has that built in. It has like a green threading model where you have like Go routines, and then it actually has its own thing to manage like, oh, you have 1,000 Go routines. That might only be like, you know, 100 threads, just example numbers. Whereas Go does all that stuff for you. So you don't have to think about it. I can just fire off every single request in like, you know, a Go routine and hey, I'm good. I'm not going to exhaust the system of threads because the Go runtime is going to handle that for me. So definitely, pros and cons.
I mean, I know a lot of people that got into Go because of containers and Docker and Kubernetes and that whole space that was already written in Go. And they're like, oh, if I'm going to modify or wrap this stuff, I'm going to use those libraries anyway. So I'm going to learn it. How have you managed to avoid all that stuff? How have you been able to like it seems like a completely different world. Like if you're doing C and Rust, like you don't even need containers and it's wonderful. You're just over here like, I have binaries, I just run binaries. Yeah,
the containers definitely come in handy. They're used in a lot of different places, but I can kind of just avoid them usually because I'm installing things like, if you're doing like a firmware upgrade or something, you're not really doing it in a container. You need to have bare metal access to the machine. Certain things like that. I
have done firmware updates from containers. I don't recommend it.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
It was the first time that I really found like the flexibility of Kubernetes in a bad way, where I deployed a daemon set that upgraded the firmware on all the servers. And I was like, this worked. I was terrified the entire time, but also that Kubernetes thing gives me the escape hatches that I kind of wanted. Whereas like I can just mount the devices in, and because it was a Red Hat container I was running on Core OS, and I was just like, none of these things line up, but I installed the RPM, flashed the firmware, and the system rebooted, and things were working. But don't recommend it.
Actually, I think you touched on something really, really important there. You said that it gave you the escape hatches that you want. I think one of these things is frameworks work so long as you're willing to work with them. So like if you're willing to work with Kubernetes, then you can trust all that stuff and you can know like, oh, I have the escape hatch that I want. For me, it's difficult. I kind of start from the lower level. So when I see a high level abstraction like that, I'm like, my escape hatch is like kill-9. Like my escape hash is just, stopping this. And if that doesn't work or there's something weird going on, then I don't really know what I'm going to do. But I get comments like this all the time where people are like, yeah, what do you think about Kubernetes? Or my favorite, what does your Kubernetes setup look like? And I'm like, I've never touched it. I've absolutely never touched it. And they're like, how do you do tech and you've never dealt with Kubernetes? And I was like, people have been doing tech for more than, when did Kubernetes come out? 9 years ago? Like, I'm sorry to say it, but like, yeah. How am I doing it without Kubernetes? Easily. The way everyone's been doing it forever up until then. That's not a knock on Kubernetes. I'm just saying like, it just hasn't come up in the kind of stuff that I deal with. So I get to avoid it.
Hey friends, we're big fans of Fly.io, and I'm here with Kurt Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Fly. Kurt, we've had some conversations, and I've heard you say that public clouds suck. What is your personal lens into public clouds sucking, and how does Fly not suck?
All right, so public clouds suck. I actually think most ways of hosting stuff on the internet sucks. And I have a lot of theories about why this is, but it almost doesn't matter. The reality is if like I've built a new app for like generating sandwich recipes because my family's just into specific types of sandwiches that use Braunschweiger as a component, for example. And then I want to like put that somewhere. You go to AWS and it's harder than just going and getting like a dedicated server from Hetzner. It's actually like more complicated to figure out how to deploy my dumb sandwich app on top of AWS because it's not built for me as a developer to be productive with. It's built for other people. It's built for platform teams to kind of build the infrastructure of their dreams and hopefully create a new UX that's useful for the developers that they work with. And again, I feel like every time I talk about this, it's like I'm just too impatient. I don't particularly want to go figure so many things out purely to put my sandwich app in front of people. And I don't particularly want to have to go talk to a platform team once my sandwich app becomes a huge startup and IPOs and I have to like do a deploy. I kind of feel like all that stuff should just work for me without me having to go ask permission or talk to anyone else. And so this informed a lot of how we built Fly. Like we're still a public cloud. We still have a lot of very similar low-level primitives as the bigger guys. But in general, they're designed to be used directly by developers. They're not built for a platform team to kind of cobble together. They're designed to be useful quickly for developers. One of the ways we've thought about this is if you can turn a very difficult problem into a 2-hour problem, people will build much more interesting types of apps. And so this is why we've done things like made it easy to run an app multi-region. Most companies don't run multi-region apps on public clouds because it's functionally impossible to do without a huge amount of upfront effort. It's why we've made things like the virtual machine primitives behind just a simple API. Most people don't do like code sandboxing or their own virtualization because it's just not really easy. There's just no path to that on top of the clouds. So in general, like I feel like, and it's not really fair of me to say public clouds suck because they were built for a different time. If you build one of these things starting in 2007, the world's very different than it is right now. And so a lot of what I'm saying, I think, is that public clouds are kind of old And there's a new version of public clouds that we should all be building on top of that are definitely going to make me as a developer much happier than I was like 5 or 6 years ago when I was kind of stuck in this quagmire.
So AWS was built for a different era, a different cloud era, and Fly, a public cloud, yes, but a public cloud built for developers who ship. That's a difference. And we here at Changelog are developers who ship. So you should trust us. Try out Fly, fly.io. Over 3 million apps, that includes us, have launched on Fly. They leverage the global Anycast load balancing, the zero config private networking, hardware isolation, instant WireGuard VPN connections with push button deployments, scaling to thousands of instances. This is the cloud you want. Check it out, fly.io. Again, fly.io.
I think what you said earlier was like really spot on. People are always like, you don't use like Kubernetes. And I'm like, Docker was like before Kubernetes and people are still using Cobalt. So like,
Yeah.
like,
Oh, and it's interesting to talk about people too, just with Docker in general, where like they're like, yeah, Linux containers. And I was like, yeah, I remember that. Like, LXC, you have Linux containers in the kernel, and like Docker, and they're like, oh, I don't think Docker uses this. Like, well, it doesn't now. Like, it changed, and now it has like lib container. And people are like, wait, what are you talking about? I was like, how do you not know that? But it's actually okay. I understand why you don't know that. It's a higher level abstraction. You get to live in that abstraction and use the framework. That's great. That's why we can get more people to do this stuff. I think it's awesome. But it's funny to me where I'm like, I love learning about the underlying technology. I want to know how these containers work. Like, Linux is interesting. I don't even know Linux the best in terms of kernels, but there's like C groups, there's namespaces. Like, there's so much that goes on there. But when it comes to the higher level software like Kubernetes, like, I don't know. I know it uses YAML, I think. That's about all I know about it.
it's amazing.
Yep.
People forget about whole like C groups in general. Like I wrote C group namespace processes before I ran containers. And I think one of my least favorite things about Kubernetes' success is the fact that LXC kind of disappeared. And I thought LXC had so many great use cases. And I like that it exists still in Proxmox. There's like these environments that like Proxmox, you can get a full VM, like hardware virtualized, get you a new kind of BIOS level thing. But also you can just run a LXC container and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
this will boot a system with sharing the kernel. And I think that's fantastic because I want that to exist. But I don't think Ubuntu did well by LXC by making LXD and then making all these like things on top of it and trying to make it its own. Like Ubuntu really wanted a Kubernetes competitor with LXC, and they're just like they went off and did their own thing.
Yeah, it's cool. This technology is like super interesting. I use Illumos servers at home, which is the open source fork of Open Solaris. I have some free BSD. So like people in these worlds, they've already known about this forever. Solaris has zones. Illumos has zones. That's their software virtualization. FreeBSD has jails. So you get virtualization. You get your own little mini operating system, but it's the same kernel. It's the same, PID space, same file descriptor space. So it's really, really lightweight. You can spin them up and tear them down like immediately because they're just very, very small containers. Container is just a word that's been expanded to mean anything. So I think it's important to kind of drill in and say, what specifically do you mean?
A lot of times I wonder if Illumos was more popular, if things like WASM would be as popular, because it's like the Illumos stuff with zones was like kind of along those lines. It felt like more. It's less of a container and more of a WASM wrapper.
WASM is so interesting. I think about that so much. Like, it's one of those things that's so poorly named, in my opinion, but like so many things are. Like, if you want to make, a web request on JavaScript, before you had fetch, you had a new XML HTTP request or whatever it was, like AJAX, asynchronous JavaScript and XML, like terrible names, but really powerful what they enabled. WASM, people are like, oh, that's just some web thing. It's like, no, it's a virtual environment to run a limited assembly instruction set on multiple operating systems, multiple different browsers. Like, it's great. Like, you have you could make games in it. Like, you can do so much because you get you can compile directly to it. It's a limited set, but it's very well defined. Put an asterisk next to that, but like it's defined, and that's awesome. So like the idea of just having this WASM blob that I could put on any different operating system, as long as we can translate it from those instructions to whatever your kernel's syscalls are, like it should just work. Great idea. Like, I think I love WASM. I think it's so cool.
Now explain to me, first of all, if you already have Illumos at home, you're writing some Rust. I thought everyone that runs those two things works at Oxide. Is that not the case? I thought that I was like, everyone that I know that's like, oh, we use Illumos and we write Rust is like, oh, they're Oxide fans or they're working on Oxide already. And so
Can I rewrite your like talk bios to say like also throw shade constantly? Like
that's not shade. Oxide's great.
But like you have like the pettiest, shadiest like tech takes. Like I think your new like your TikTok channel needs to have like a Justin shade of the week, because I will like actually start like showing up to your videos.
Now
and,
that
like,
I don't work for enterprises, I can just be a little more honest about some things. It's fine.
I love the shade. I think it's great.
do you see how he keeps rubbing it in? He's like, because
I wasn't doing shade there. That wasn't shade.
See, the shade just comes out of him at this point. Do you see this? This is what I deal with.
I would 100% see it. Oh yeah, now that I don't work at enterprise companies. Oh, sorry, that's my print being done over there. I don't know if you can hear that.
Worst friend ever. Like, let me just rub in. Like, he's always like, I don't have a million meetings today, and I'm like,
So, Dave.
So yes, back on track.
Why don't you work on Oxide yet?
Oxide is awesome. I think they're doing really cool stuff. I have a lot of friends that I know that work there. I talk to people that work at Oxide. Really cool stuff. Really awesome. A lot of the people that are at Oxide came from, Joyent before that. So a lot of Illumos stuff, a lot of stuff like that going on. I don't know if that'd be a place that I end up in the future. I think it'd be a great company to work for. Maybe I'll apply if they, have any sort of job openings. But right now, I'm happy with my current situation. I have no real reason to move. But I will say this. If I were to quit my job anytime soon, Oxide would be the first place I applied. 100%, hands down. Like they're great people, smart people doing really, really cool work. So yeah, and Illumos Rust, natural fit.
you hear that, Oxide? Offer Dave a bunch of money.
Did you listen to the On the Metal podcast they had?
Absolutely.
That was such a great like history lesson of like what the world of tech was like. And I love the interviews they had. Even the current one they have, Oxide and Friends, is really good.
Oh yeah.
But I love the history side of technology, and On the Metal was just so great.
I love that too. That's okay. He might drink Dr. Pepper, but if you ever want a good book like tech history or like to go down a rabbit hole, he's the best friend ever. Like all of a sudden he'll be like, and then I read this one book about this and that, and you're just like, we just went on a journey, and I'm gonna go read all those books. And like,
I try to summarize it so you don't have to. Same with white papers. That's like why I read.
Being
one of the
friends
reasons I read
with him is like getting homework a lot though, like because like all of a sudden I have like 6 book
I know I don't want to do that.
No, but like he's also like downloading information, because all of a sudden he's like, and then this one dude created like what's that? I think he did the Shahs. And then he was like, but he also like his hobby was unicycles, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this information, but I love
cool.
it.
Yeah, I don't remember what the book was called, but yes, no, that was a fantastic one.
Also, he picks out your fun lunch like places to go when you go to conferences. So like,
as long as they have Dr. Pepper,
I just throw Dr. Pepper at him, and then he picks as a place to go to lunch. Hanging out with him is fun.
That's great.
Dave, can you explain Void Linux to me?
Sure.
Void Linux? What is Void Linux?
I've never used it, but I just know it's where a lot of the systemd haters, not haters necessarily, but people that just wanted to avoid over complex things.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's a good way of saying it. It's more than just a systemd-less operating system. There's a lot of reasons to do it. There's like I think you can get the GNU variant or like the muscle version of like the libc, so you can have whatever floats your boat basically. But this was around 2018 when I had switched over to like an IB or like a ThinkPad laptop, and I wanted to like a Linux daily driver. That didn't last too long. I'm a Mac guy at heart, so I got my MacBook and that's what I use. But I was looking for a good operating system, and I just was annoyed with using systemd on Ubuntu. I think before that, what do they have? Upstart or something? And I was just sick of all these.
Upstart was terrible too.
Oh, 100%.
Upstart was worse than systemd in my opinion.
Absolutely. Like there's a lot of things I don't love about systemd, but I think it actually it is what it's trying to be. It is a like service manager. Like it starts up your services in order. It has a lot of good dependencies. Like it does some of the stuff that it does really well. Like I'm not a systemd hater. It just does more than I need it to do. So I wanted something that was very thin, something that just got out of my way. And I was looking for different distributions of Linux, and I came across, I think it was like Alpine, Void Linux, and Void stuck out to me because it used Runit as its service manager, and that was loosely based on a different service manager called like Daemon Tools. And I really, really like Daemon Tools.
I don't know Daemon Tools.
Oh yeah, Daemon Tools is really cool. It's just a super simple thing. If you use Daemon Tools and then you go over to run it, you'll see like, oh, these were like absolutely one was inspired by the other. You can see it.
How close is that to like sysv init?
Not really.
Okay.
Close in the sense that it's very simple, but it's not like you don't have like the Etsy init.d scripts. You don't have any of that stuff. You still have like Etsy RC local things like that, but no, each, like when you want to make a daemon on the system, you make a directory with the name of the daemon and you create a file in it called run. As long as run is executable, that's it. That will get executed. If it fails, it'll get retried every second. It logs to like standard out of the process that it's going to, or standard error. I'd have to double check, but like you can also make a logging process. So each thing can log to its own process. You could send it to syslog, you could send it to a file, log it to like a temp directory. So it's one of those things where if you hear, oh, it's just a service manager, but you configure everything through shell scripts, if that resonates with you, then it's absolutely the right distribution.
I like systemd. I actually think that at running it in certain cases, like the way you can like add to things and add overlays for services, like I really like how they manage some of that. I do think it does a lot, but I actually hated sysv in it. Like I did not like all of the bash scripts. I didn't like numbering them 0 through 99 to make sure that my startup was in order. And then when I shut it down, the driver got unloaded at the right, like that. It felt like they took bash too far. And I was like, you should have switched at some point to Rust or something. But how much is Void like, or run it like that? Is it this one folder of all my bash scripts I just throw in there? I can do whatever I want. It's quote unquote simple because it's all my own bash scripts, or is it a little more structured than that?
Oh, it's more structured than that. Like there's going to be a directory, I think it's like /var/service. And inside there, you just make a directory for whatever daemon you want. And then you give it a run script and whatever's in that will get executed. They don't necessarily have the concept of dependencies, but you can tell one service to wait on another service. So you can make like I don't want this service to start, I don't want X to start until Y is started. But then there's this concept of core services, and core services would be like networking, file systems, things that need to be up. And those are exactly the thing you hate. They're numbered. They're just absolutely numbered scripts that execute in that order. And I totally get why that can be annoying because you're not really defining dependencies. You're just defining ordering. But when I look at it, I'm like, this is so simple. I love it. So yeah, there's definitely, like, if you start looking in the core services, they're numbered, but you really don't need to. If you're just running your own user level services where you don't care, like, the file system's up, the networking's up. It's great for that. I think it's so simple.
Have you ever looked at Go Crazy?
No, I don't know what that is.
Not being since you don't write Go, I was assuming not, but it was literally just like, it's a Linux distro that just runs a Go binary is what they like. I think it can run other binaries if you just shove it on it, but like there's no init system, like it's PID1, your thing.
Cool.
And it's just like, it's meant for Raspberry Pis, right? Like I have one thing, this computer's going to run one service. And when I want to upgrade it, I think it has a wrapper around it to do upgrades and whatnot so that you can actually like push it out. But it's just like, yeah, we just send it back out to the console as whatever your logs are for your thing. Like we don't have any init system beyond that to be able to, but like, I love that like minimization of like, I want that thing just to do one thing alone and I'm going to leave it over there. And I could carve it up in a virtual machine. I could put it in a LXC container. I could do whatever I want to make that as simple as possible. So I understand the wrapper. And I think containers were on that path and things got complicated.
Yeah, they always seem to. That seems like the fate of all software. But no, I love that idea. I think that's so cool because I think people forget this. Like when it comes to like just CPUs in general, people are like, the CPU is not good for this, not good for this. It's like, it's not really good for anything. It's for general computing. It can get everything done. If you were to talk about that abstraction from hardware and bring it to software, it's like, well, like, the Linux kernel or, this distribution, it's good at being a computer. It can run a desktop manager. It can run a browser. It can run audio, networking. It does everything. But if you don't need that and you can just strip all that down and just give it like one process, you do this one thing, you can get amazing performance out of it. Like that is, and I think that's great. If you know your use case, strip out the stuff you don't need and just target that.
And that's like, you could not only better performance, but also just like better understanding of the system when it breaks and you're like, I don't have 50 different places to look because this is one thing. And I work at Sidero, we run Talos Linux, which is literally like PID1 is an API server. And it's just like, there's no SSH, you send things to a gRPC API and it's just like, here's your spec and now do the thing. And the more things we can minimize out of that, which is like, it's running Kubernetes. Kubernetes is complex enough. Like don't put all the systemd and cloud init and everything else under the cover to like get there. Like just strip away all that other stuff. And yeah, I love the like single purpose sort of Linux distros and ones that just find their niche and they're like, this is what we do. We are not general purpose. And
That's what yeah, exactly.
I run Bluefin on my desktop. I think it's a great Linux distro, but it's a desktop Linux distro that does all of the things that I need and can be as complex as I want it to be.
Yeah.
At first, when you get into software, there's so many different choices, right? Like there's simple stuff, there's more really like deep and tons of options, you know? But like I think now the longer you're in software, you realize that those things all have their place, because sometimes you want to be super picky and play around with all the settings and do all that. And sometimes you're like, dude, I just need to get work done. And like I just want it to be as simple as possible. Like so I'm grateful that they have all those options, but trying to figure out how to learn all those options and stuff, it is like really daunting when you first get in software until a couple of years later, you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, 100%.
It's honestly the thing I think that Bash does really well, right? Like, cause Bash, like it has a lot of hidden things and it does a lot of things that are complex and convoluted if you have not tripped over them before. But it's like getting started, like you get a terminal, like I can literally type help and it just like lists out a bunch of stuff. I can read all of the docs. Like they provide enough information to get you started, but productizing Bash would be a bad idea. Cause you're like, you should strip away all the things you don't need. And you're like, oh, actually I don't want all these built-ins. Maybe I should move to a different language and strip out some of that stuff and only use the libraries that I should be importing. It's the same thing with systems. Like they just get so complex, but the easy to get started method of like, hey, here's the hello world. And now here's Kubernetes is not the like introduction that you want.
Oh man, yeah, there's so much there to jump off on. Like I think on Autumn's point, I the first thing I think about is like, this is a weird analogy, but I think about video games that come out where they have like a character you can play and there's character customization. Like there are some people that will spend 5 hours in there customizing their character.
Yeah. And
then I jump into a game like that. I'm like, just want to play. I don't care. Random, please. And when you're talking about that, like, yeah, tech can be daunting. There can be so much configuration you can do. You can get lost in configs and RC files and learning everything. Or you can say, I want a desktop that just works. Like, and this is why when people ask me, like, what distribution of Linux would you recommend, Dave, for learning? Like Void Linux? I'm like, no. Like, if you're putting on your desktop, like, go with Ubuntu. Like, go with something real simple. Like, just get your feet wet. Like, you know, learn how to open a terminal once. Once you get comfortable with that, then we can talk about a different Linux distribution where you might be living in the terminal. But yeah, like, just get started. Usually is like some of the best advice. But yeah, when you have something like complex like Kubernetes, you kind of look at hello world, you look at Kubernetes like, wait, what happened here? How do we get from this to that?
What's up, friends? I'm here in the breaks with my good friend, my new friend, Kyle Spearin, the creator of Bitwarden, the open source password manager you know and love. And now they have secrets management for businesses, for developers, for you, for your infrastructure, for all the things. So Kyle, I know that Bitwarden has deep roots. Take me to the beginning. How did you begin this thing?
The early stages of Bitwarden came from me wanting to create something that was really easy to use so that lots of people could adopt it and use it, but also appeal to people who are like-minded like myself, who really like the open source message and the benefits of open source technology and what that brings to the market. You know, fast forward several years of kind of doing that, there was a lot of untapped potential too in the product. But there's a lot of things I don't, have strengths in, and where I thought I could bring in outside help to help me. And I helped develop that over the course of several years of running the product and build those right relationships with the right people. And then once I was ready to kind of accept that help, I brought people in and we really took the business to the next level of where it could be. And now we have, millions and millions and millions of users using our product today. And we have multiple products that we really service the kind of security industry with.
Okay, so now you've scaled, you've got millions and millions and millions of users deep into password management, and you've scaled the team, you've scaled the product, you've scaled the company, and now you have secrets management for teams, for infrastructure, for all the things. What are some of the key concerns that made you go this direction?
There's a sprawl of secrets for, think about how large your environment is and all the things and all the endpoints and machines you have to manage to kind of orchestrate and make this whole thing work, right? Like there are tools that help you do all that, but all those tools are using secrets in different ways, right? you end up with this sprawl of secrets that are everywhere. Much like the sprawl of secrets you have in password management of all the services you use on the internet, it's kind of overwhelming. Like, I think a lot of people, if you would ask how many different passwords or secrets that you have that you kind of use across the internet, if I had to bet, almost all of them would underestimate the value that they actually are. And once you understand the depth of the sprawl you have, it's a challenge to figure out how you're going to do that and what tool you're going to find to kind of manage that. In addition to the sprawl, there's also the sprawl of your organization itself, the human element of it as well, which, at every company, there are people who come and there are people who go, and there are people who need access to certain secrets and there are people who don't need access to other secrets. And that's also a very challenging problem to solve. Part of the core feature set of what Bitwarden Secrets Manager is solving are those two problems. How do you manage from a single pane of glass all the secrets you need to use throughout your environments and infrastructure? And then how do you control who has access to those secrets in a kind of least privilege access way that creates the best security practices that you need to secure your organization?
Okay, get streamlined secrets management for developers at bitwarden.com/secrets. Get end-to-end encrypted Bitwarden Secrets Manager. Secure your infrastructure, your machine secrets, and your developer secrets. Start a free 7-day Bitwarden Secrets Manager trial today at bitwarden.com/secrets. That's bitwarden.com/secrets.
Where do you go to learn? Like, what are your sources for, like, I need to go dive into this thing? Are you reaching for books like the Rust book? Are you just finding more YouTube channels? What is the kind of process there? Like, I need to learn something new.
I'd have to think about like what specifically I'm trying to learn. But I sort of have like the cheat code. I know Autumn mentioned you reading books. My cheat code is I actually read the man pages. I say that jokingly, but a lot of people are like, Dave, how do you know so much about Bash? I was like, well, if you go to the man page, they're like, whoa. I didn't want that. I just wanted your knowledge without the work. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, good luck.
All right, well, here's a pager and go run this. And that's the other option.
Yep. I've even written my own software where it's like I was showing off a piece of software I wrote in C, and they're like, so how does it work under the hood? I was like, well, here's a 300-line block comment at the top of the C file. Like, there's ASCII diagrams in it. Go read it. Like, that's how it works. Yeah. And they're like, that's like the end of the comment chain. It's like, okay, well, that's fine.
Never mind.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that. I wouldn't immediately get it in 2 seconds. So to answer your question, I like to go to the source first if I can. That's a confusing way of saying it because it sounds like I'm saying source code. I'm not saying that. I like to go to the documentation source. So if there's like a man page for command, I'll go to that. If it's a new language, I love the books. I love the Rust book. Beyond that, if I'm trying to learn something new, I mean, I'm not above doing what other programmers do. Like, I'll hit up Google and be like, all right, how to make array this programming language. Like, I do that as well. And then I get some Stack Overflow thing. So yeah, just like a mixture of all that.
Do you still Google how to for loop in Bash?
No.
It's like the bar of like, how well do you know Bash? Like, do you have to Google the for loop? And it's like, I was probably like 4 or 5 years ago that I stopped having to Google it. I'm like, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yep.
But we're here, and this is just how it's going to be.
That became like a little bit of a meme in my community, actually. Someone commented, they were like, I know you couldn't write array handling in Bash without like Googling it. And I responded, I was like, I don't know who you're talking to, buddy. Like, I do know how to do that, and I don't even think that's that impressive. And I try to be humble about it. I'm like, it's like I use it all the time. Like, yeah. I do know how to do it. I could go to a whiteboard, and everyone was like, please record yourself at a whiteboard. So when I did the live stream, I bust out the whiteboard. I started writing Bash by hand, and they're like, oh my God, is this valid? It's like, of course it is. Like, I know it is. I've been doing this forever. But yeah, it's hard to mix that. Like, I'm confident in what I know, but I don't want to come across as like arrogant. Like, I do try to be humble about it. So it's tough with a name like you suck at programming, but
but like just remembering how long it took you to learn that, and like putting in the work and reading the man pages. And I think of like, same thing for learning systems. Like, I go read the white papers. It's like almost every like big system came out of some research that they wrote a white paper about. I'm like, oh, find the white paper. I'm going to read it. And it's like, yeah, that's how I'm going to spend my time. I can figure out like why they wrote the thing. Like, what answer were they trying to solve? And like the man pages are going to give you that stuff. Like, oh, these are the built-ins because we have to have this set. We don't going to execute out to something else because it may not be there. And we need to build that into the shell. And that's sort of like, oh, that's the problem you're solving. Now, why would I want to execute out to a different command for that same functionality? Okay, let's figure it out.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is even just like the history of it is important. People ask certain questions like, why is this like an external command when it's built in? It's like, well, that wasn't always built in. Like, I mean, yeah. Why didn't this do this? Well,
I always start with like, imagine your hard drive was really, really small.
Right.
You had to mount some other file system to like get that command. Like, what would you do? And people are like, oh, that's when they wrote this? Like, yes, like this is exactly when they wrote this.
Yeah, one that I've been seeing lately on my channel is talking about where files are stored for executables on Linux /bin/sbin/userbin/usersbin. And they're like, why aren't they all just in one directory? I'm like, well, they are now. There are some operating systems that are trying to unify it all. Like, why weren't they in the past? It's like, well, think about how much storage space you had. Like, if you're a system administrator, you might only need the sbin commands. You might just want to mount a specific partition. Like, I don't know if that's the reason. I wasn't doing computing back then, but like in the 1970s and 1980s, I could absolutely imagine that. So it's cool context that like I can only look up now, but I love talking to people that are like older than me where they can give me insight into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's so many good podcasts and books and everything else that are fantastic. I just watched this YouTube video that you reminded me of, and I'm gonna put it in the channel, but I think you would love it. And it was like the bits between the bits is what it was called. And it was all about like what happens when you're compiling it was a C program. I think it was C, not C++. And like, how did this variable get set? And he's like, goes directly into like, well, here's, main, but let's look at the assembly and figure out like what it actually did in that. I was like, this is fantastic. I love this.
That's cool.
So yeah, I'm going to put that in the show notes and I'll send it to you because that was
awesome. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah. I recommend to some people when they ask about like learning like systems and C and stuff, I tell them to go to the C book, the KNR C book. Yeah, and one of the things they do in there is like writing malloc from scratch. Like, how do you actually write a memory allocator? And I'm like, this is useful knowledge to have. Like, you should know how memory is allocated to your process, how your process can increase its heap size, break pointer, things like that. It's just, it comes in handy in ways that you wouldn't even expect it to. Once you understand how these underlying systems work, you just have the abstractions in your brain where when I look at larger systems, I'm like, oh yeah, it's just like how an operating system does it. They're like, no, it's completely novel. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, it's really not.
Nothing's really novel. It's the same problems over and over and over again if you abstract enough things away.
1,000,000%. Yes, that's the truest thing.
And some people just, you don't have to go into the details. So you think that everything below you is magic. And at some point you're like, no, actually electrons are going through a gate. Like how they did that was, well, let's see.
Oh, this is something I deal with too. I get one comment basically just like was like a punch to the stomach. I didn't expect it. It wasn't a bad comment, but someone said they're like, man, I would love to have the knowledge you have. But I'm afraid to touch a low level language like C. And I was like, C is high level language, man. Like I know what they meant, but it took me back at first. And I was like, I hate that for people like just getting started with tech. They start at such a high level that they have to like dig down like an archaeologist to try and dredge up these things. It's like, no, people are still writing that. Like, you don't have to guess how C was written. Like, it's still being written. Like, and it stinks, like, because they start at the top, they try to work their way down. It's like, no, you got to start at the bottom. Like you mentioned, like electrons and gates and stuff like that. If you start at that level and work your way up, you start to appreciate everything so much more. You learn like basic and or like flip flops. When you learn those kind of gates and logic that way and how it's actually stored, static, dynamic, all that stuff, you start to appreciate all of the instruction sets we have and all of the higher level language. The fact that I can write a while loop and have these gates actually acted out for me, that's amazing. The amount of stuff that has to go right for that to work.
Do you do any like embedded systems or like FPGAs, any of that stuff?
I don't. I've done a little bit of like soldering stuff, but that's about it. Like I've hacked the original Xbox, put the little mod chip in there. I've taken apart the little Game & Watch Nintendo thing and added bigger storage. So that was a fun little solder project. But besides that, like, no, I don't typically deal with those kind of systems. I think they're really cool. They're just outside of my realm of knowledge.
Yeah.
Your eyes lit up when I mentioned the Xbox.
I've watched some FPGA videos and I'm just like, I can't do this. Like, this is too much, but I love it. But yeah, Xbox modding is what mostly put me through some of college, modding people's Xboxes and doing it for myself. And yeah.
Yeah, I think you said that in like a comment or something on one of my videos. It's so cool.
Dave, thanks so much for coming on the show and talking to us all about why we suck at programming and Bash. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is really awesome. You can find me online in a couple places. The easiest way would be just to look up You Suck at Programming. You'll find my YouTube, you'll find my Instagram, you'll find my TikTok. If that doesn't work for you, go to my website, daveeddy.com or ysap.sh. You can go ahead and curl that in your terminal and it will render just fine. It also works in the browser, but it looks a lot cooler in the terminal.
It does.
So yeah. Yeah, so that's where you can find me.
Can confirm. If you're listening to this in your car, pull up that terminal emulator on your Android phone or whatever you have. Try to curl it. It looks great.
Also, find his cringe script video on TikTok because I laughed so hard.
Thank you so much. Yes, I have a lot of videos where I will go over different scripts that people do or submit, or even ones that I'll make up and pretend that other people have submitted. I don't actually pretend, I just straight up about it. But I will say, I'm not shy when I call scripts cringe, and mine are based, all right? You have to remember that. Most people write cringe stuff. I write really good stuff.
Dude, I was like dying. I was like, he did not write a whole script and make it cringe. And then like every level it went down, it got funnier. And I was like, I can't with him. Like, I was like, I'd definitely be his friend. Like,
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Heck yeah. You know what? I'll drink some coffee now that we're friends. I'll try it.
now you're the odd person out, Justin. What now?
Yeah,
what
that's right.
now?
I tried coffee the other week. It was like, it was like a non-coffee thing. I'm like, no, I couldn't.
Why did you do it without me? Like, we need to go find, like, we need to go to one of those, we need to go like a flight at like a Starbucks roastery or something, you know, like,
But
or
the
like
coffee tastes bad.
Wait, just hear me out. Gosh, we need to go and get you like a whole flight of different stuff and figure out what you like. Like, what about a cold brew milkshake? Like, it's a milkshake.
If it has a coffee flavor, I don't like it. It's the same thing with alcohol. I don't drink alcohol.
I don't drink
tastes
alcohol
bad.
either, but coffee is amazing. What is wrong with you? What? You're broken.
I agree with this so much. People are like, Dave, you would like this.
Dave, you're my friend. You're my friend.
This has like a s'mores chocolate taste. It's like, yeah, but it has a coffee taste too. So
Yeah, I know. There's like the other flavor in there. Yeah, I don't like that one.
I agree, 100%.
And it's like side quests on drinks. Like they're also just so expensive that I'm just like, you know what? If I don't like the taste of the coffee or the alcohol, I'm not going to drink it. I could just go have some. Like, you know what? Like bars give me free cherry Cokes because it's great. It's like, oh, you're the designated driver. I'm like, yeah, that's it. I'm the DD.
That's what
Okay, but like coffee, like when there's coffee drinks mixed with other flavors, I get mad because I just want it to taste like coffee.
No, the coffee's the best.
That's insane. That's insane. Yeah. The coffee's
Also,
the bad part.
I don't drink alcohol because I'd rather save the calories for like Cinnabons or like things
better
that taste
uses
good.
of the-
like brown.
of the
Yeah,
calories,
like I'm just like, y'all do that, and I'm gonna get dessert, and then I'll like judge you drunk people and drive you home after.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just give my drink tickets to friends.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You make more friends that way too.
You'd make so many friends
Here's your-
that
yeah.
way.
Every conference, here you go. You want a drink ticket? What do
Look,
you do?
I've made
Yeah.
so many friends. I'm just like, you want another drink?
And
And then I sit there stuffing my face with all the nachos and food. Like I show up to tech stuff for food. Like
You
I'm like,
give
who's
away the
gonna
drink?
feed me? Yeah,
Give away
like
the drink voucher, and you're like, I've earned these calories.
if it's between brownies or a Cinnabon or nachos and a drink, I am 100% gonna get a strawberry lemonade and go live my best life with that brownie or like nachos or something.
Free idea for every conference: give out taco tickets. Right?
Ooh.
Look, I would show up. Like I plan whole vacations around food and show up to weddings for the cake. Okay, like I want to go to Italy to just eat my way through it. Like I'll be like, oh, look at the pretty building. Like shove pasta in my face. Like
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming to the show. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Ship It with Justin Garrison and Autumn Nash. Subscribe now if you haven't already. Head to shipit.show for all the ways, or just search for Ship It wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find us. Thanks once again to our partners at fly.io, to the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder for these dope beats, and to Sentry. Use code CHANGELOG when you sign up and save $100 off their team plan. That's all for now, but come back next week when we continue discussing everything that happens after Git Push.